So good morning. Now, can you hear me when I speak like this?
Yes.
My dad's pointing up. Okay, so I am from Washington State originally, and I grew up in Yakima, Washington. And but when I went to college, I went to University of Washington in Seattle. And then a few years after that, I came to Port Townsend, and I was flying for a small airline here called Port Townsend Airways. You might have heard of it. I don't think they're here anymore. But anyway, it was while I was at college that God called me from my dream to be an airline pilot and to become a missionary pilot. And that's a whole story in itself. But I just want to share with you about what we're doing in Indonesia using those skills. Because this church has been a part of our ministry since I was sharing with Pastor Ted. In 1999 was when I first came in contact with Bay Baptist. I think you guys were still in Port Ludlow, if I'm not mistaken. Did you guys used to be in Port Ludlow?
I think they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so it's been a long relationship, and we really appreciate you guys supporting us all these years and praying for us and giving us opportunity to come and share like this. We were here actually in the U.S. last year, but because of COVID, we couldn't come see you. So we're thankful that this year when we're back, we can see you. The reason we're back is my daughter, Shinta, the one in the middle back there, is going to college. And so we weren't even able to get to Indonesia until this past February. So we only spent 4 months in Indonesia before coming back here. So if you're not familiar, where Indonesia is, it's just above Australia, and it's part of Southeast Asia. There's hundreds and hundreds of languages spoken there, and so it's one of the places where Wycliffe Bible Translators has a focus. I work with Wycliffe Bible Translators, and the place that we serve is on in Papua, which is the far eastern part of Indonesia, there where the circle is. That arrow points to the town that we live in, which is called Sentani. Now my wife Noni is from Indonesia, and she's from Medan, which if you look up here where it says Malaysia, there's a city here called Medan. That's where she's from. So she's from clear on the other side of Indonesia from where we live now. And for her, it's a very different culture, even though it's the same country, but it's very different. That country is further across the United States. And so it's quite large, and it's just full of islands. And so I mentioned that Shinta graduated. I'm just going to throw a couple pictures of her. This is from her high school in Sentani. There's a school with the missionary kids, and so we were thankful that she was able to graduate this May. They actually were able to do it in person. We had to be outside in an outdoor gym, but yeah, so we're so proud of her. And now she will be going to Purdue University, and we're actually leaving tomorrow morning to head to Indiana to drop her off there. And then on Friday, Lord willing, we'll continue our trip to Indonesia with just the 3 of us. So this is a picture of a typical village in Papua where we fly the airplanes. Now, it's very remote. The villages, if you were to walk there, it might take you a month to get from our town out to these villages. You just have to go through the jungle or maybe take a boat. And so when the missionaries came and had airplanes, they would build a runway out in the jungle and allow the airplane to come in and bring the missionaries and bring them supplies, medical aid. But we also serve the local people, and actually about 75% of our flying is for the local people. So these are just some more pictures of what it looks like there. Most of our runways are grass runways. This is the type of airplane that I fly. It's called a Pilatus Porter. It has 1 engine, and it holds 9 passengers, or about 3/4 of a ton of cargo. And so it can land on really, really short runways. And you can see some of the runways are up in the mountains where we actually land uphill and park at the top, and then when you take off downhill. And so it's very challenging, but very rewarding, and it's been really neat to develop relationships with the people out there in the villages. They're people too, just like us. They look different, a little different, Their culture is different, but they still need Jesus just like we do. And we're there to bring them God's word. And so the airplane is just a tool to help that. I'm not a Bible translator. I serve the Bible translators. So I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of what it looks like an airplane landing in the mountain. This is at a place called Langda up on top. It's about, I think, 6,000 feet elevation up on top of a high plateau up in the mountains. That's my friend speaking. So that runway just drops off about 2,000 feet off the end of that runway. So it goes down into a deep ravine. So you can just see how high those mountains are. We have to fly about 13,000 feet to get over that mountain there to go back to where our city is. So it's very remote. Sometimes they even get snow up there on top. And they're just a few degrees south of the equator, so it's warm, but they can get a lot of snow. Whoops, that's not what I want. So yeah, this just gives you an example of what some of the things we fly, cargo-wise. We fly just about anything, except one time someone wanted us to fly dynamite, and we turned that down. So we'll fly fuel, because there's no way to get fuel out in the villages. Like if the missionaries have a generator or something, they need fuel for that. Solar panels, all sorts of foods and building supplies. We fly plywood and roofing and just about anything you could need that you would buy at a store in town. So, and then we fly a lot of the people from the villages when they need to go to town to buy something, or if their children need to go to school. Like a lot of the villages don't have a school, and so we'll transport them to town so they can attend school. And then medevacs is another important thing that we do when people get sick. There's often no healthcare workers out in the villages, and so we'll bring them to town so they can go to the hospital. So, but the main reason that I'm there is we're there to serve Bible translation. And these two gentlemen are Bible translators. They're translating both of them are translating the Old Testament into two different languages. They're from two different tribes. But they're translating the Old Testament. There used to be missionaries working with them, and they learned how to translate the New Testament. The missionaries have since gone home or retired, but these two men are still working to put God's complete word into their own language. The man in the red shirt is Pak Andi, is his name, and he's in the Ketemban tribe, which is up in the mountains. And then the man with the stocking cap is Pilemon, like Philemon. It's the Indonesian way of saying Philemon. And he's been working by himself for a number of years to finish the Old Testament. He told me when we were there a few months ago, he told me he should be done in a couple more years. There's a lot of checking process to do, and he's working on his own. His wife helps him type in the manuscripts because he does everything by hand. And but it'll be exciting to see when they have the complete Word of God in their hands. So, and then this is what we really like to see. These are some Ketemban men using their New Testaments. They don't have the Old Testament yet, but using their New Testaments as they're listening to a preacher speak. So that's we don't want to just translate Bibles and then have them go sit on a shelf somewhere. It's for people to use to change their lives. So this is a story I want to tell about how God took care of me. One day I was flying about 2 hours out to a runway. We don't go to very often, but it was a beautiful day. You can look up there and see how blue the sky is. There was no clouds. And to fly for that long without seeing any clouds is pretty amazing in that part of the world. Until I crested the mountain and started to descend for that runway. I looked ahead at the runway as it came into view, and there was just one little cloud, like, I don't know, 100 yards wide, let's say, sitting right off the end of the runway. And these aren't long runways, it's like a 1,200 foot long runway. And I was like, oh man, I flew all this way, but I had 15 minutes extra fuel, so I thought, well, I'll just circle. And so I started circling overhead, hoping that the cloud would move out of the way. And but as I started circling, suddenly on the radio, I heard a voice, Uniform Charlie Foxtrot, that's the name of the airplane. Uniform Charlie Foxtrot, this is Devoto, don't land. There's a tree on the runway. The tree fell down in the night and it's blocking the runway. And if you land, your wing will hit it and you'll crash. On the right, about in the center of the screen, you see that dirt area amongst all the ferns and stuff. I don't have a picture of the tree because the people were up there cutting it out while I was circling overhead. They had chainsaws out and they were cutting it away, and so that I could land. And so just about when I was about to the end of my 15 minutes of fuel, they called me on the radio, said the tree's clear, and as I came around to land, the cloud moved out of the way. So I say this is my saved by the cloud story. And I truly believe that God put that cloud right there to keep me from having an accident. Because the tree fell down, you can see it's a steep embankment there, it fell down, and the roots were kind of hanging out. It had gotten loose, pigs had dug around it and it had gotten loose and fallen down. And so the roots were kind of hanging out over the runway right where my wing would have gone. And would have hit it, caused a lot of damage. So thankful that God is always looking out for us. So, Noni has a number of different ministries that she's involved with. One of those is we have some land that we bought, because Noni's Indonesian, we're able to own property there. And so we had this piece of land, about 3,000 square meters, and for a number of years we've been wondering what to do with it. God, what do you want? She was wondering, what do you want to do? And we talked to a number of people that were interested, but nothing really panned out. But finally, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, she said, why don't we just build some houses? There's a housing shortage, and the missionaries that were coming couldn't find places to live as they were working there. And so we said, we'll build some houses and then rent them out to the missionaries so they have a place to live. And so these are the houses as we were building them. God provided the funding so that we could do that. And this is what they look like today. There's three houses. They each have 4 bedrooms, and they're on a beautiful piece of land, kind of up next to the jungle. And but they've been used for some interesting things, because things that we didn't expect. This is what they look like on the inside. We tried to make them somewhat modern so that people can be comfortable in there. They have air conditioners. Anyway, we were contacted by the organization Faith Comes by Hearing, and what Faith Comes by Hearing does is record the New Testament into different languages around the world, so that people that can't read can still have God's Word that they can understand. And so they contacted us. They needed a house that, how many people was it, Noni? 8? They wanted a house that 8 people could live in together and have a little small recording studio, and they could record. So the couple up near the top there in the purple shirts, those were the missionaries doing the recording, and then all the other people were voice actors. And so they would go and read the scriptures in they built a little sound studio in one of the rooms, and they recorded 2 different groups have come now, and they've recorded the New Testament into the Yali language, and then also into the Sentani language, which is the tribe where we live. And so it's just been neat to see how we didn't imagine that the houses would ever become a recording studio for God's Word, but they did. And so, these were the Sentani, this is the Sentani tribe. It was a different group. Another thing that Noni has been doing for a number of years now is she started a language school to teach missionaries the Indonesian language, and then also teach local people English. And so it was meeting in our house, but 3 years ago, I think it was, 3 or 4 years ago, God provided some funds, and so that she could make a facility dedicated to the school. And we ended up building 4 classrooms in our backyard. So this is our backyard, and this is the building just as it was completed. And it's been used for a number of things in addition to the language school. For two summers before we came back for our furlough, there was English camps. We had 3 English camps with a number of local kids that wanted to just come and speak English with people. And so they'd have these camps that were 3 or 4 days long. And a lot of the kids from Shinton and Dinda's high school came, and they were the native English speakers. And they just had games and all sorts of fun, just like summer camp. And so those classrooms were used for that. So that was neat. This is one of our Wycliffe Bible translators. They needed to decide on the alphabet that they were going to use for the language, the Bible translation they were doing, and they needed a facility to do it. So they came and had their workshop. They called it the phonology workshop, where they developed the alphabet and the sound system that they were going to use for this language. Another thing that we used the building for is a youth group for our daughter's classmates. Our church there doesn't really have a youth group, and so there was a need for just the kids to be able to get together, learn about Jesus and just life outside of their school, which is a Christian school, and outside of church. And so the classrooms were a perfect place for that. And so we have a friend that was he was a missionary now, but he was a former youth pastor, so he was the teacher. We just organized everything. And so that's been a blessing to the kids. Another thing that Noni does is she's the advisor, class sponsor for Adinda's high school class. And basically she's kind of a coach and a mentor as the kids in Adinda's class raise money for their senior class trip that they will take when they're right before they graduate. And usually what that entails is making a meal and selling it at the basketball games or the soccer games that the school has. This last year has been really difficult with COVID. There haven't been games, and even when there were games, they didn't want us selling food. So we were only able to do it twice this last year. But it's a good way for the kids to have work experience, because most of them are foreigners, and as a foreigner, you can't work. And they can't just go down to the local restaurant and get a job, and so it's good for them to be able to have some work experience before they go back to their home countries. So that's been one of Noni's ministries for the last couple of years. So I mentioned to you that we were here last year. We finally were able to get a visa for me to go back this past February. And we were only there for 4 months, but while we were there, we were running full tilt the whole time. The day after we arrived, those rental houses that I showed you earlier were broken into. 2 of them were broken into, and someone came in and stole stuff from our renters and from us. And so I spent a few days dealing with that with the police. And then we started doing some construction projects on our house that we live in. One of the issues we've had is with a fence. We've always had just a chain link fence, and we've had over the years a number of times chain link is really easy to cut or to unwind. So we were having people get in and steal our dogs, and there were a peeping Tom, and so we decided we really need to build a wall. And so instead of having this chain link fence now, we built this wall. We also had some repairs to our house, like when it would rain hard, our Shinta would get rained on in her room because the roof was leaking, so we had to replace the roof. We wanted to put air conditioner in another room. So just a number of it was just a building project, basically. I was still flying, but Noni was dealing with these things at home. And then the biggest one we did was a well. For the 17 years we've lived in that house, we've just had the city water, which has been sometimes it works okay, sometimes it doesn't. And so we finally were able to drill a well. You can see that the top left is the old pump that we used to have. It was just dirty, and it was very weak, pumping water up to a water tower from the city water. But now we have a well. In the bottom picture, you can see the water just pouring out of the well. So it's a blessing now that we have water. And we're thankful for God for providing that for us. While we were doing our all this construction in our house, one day our next door neighbor came and was chatting with Noni, and he said that they were starting a church in his house, and they just have a really small house. And Noni asked him, where are you going to have the church? And they said, oh, we'll just have it out in the yard, which is just like a dirt patch out in front of their house, maybe about half the size of this sanctuary. And they were just going to put a tarp over it, and you understand it rains a lot in Indonesia, and so if they could have a facility, that would be so much nicer. Well, they didn't have any money for a facility because they were just starting this new church. And so Noni said, why don't you just use our classrooms? And they're big enough. And so that's what you see here is this is the first Sunday that the Bethel Church in our neighborhood started. And they've been meeting there ever since, even while we're gone. They still meet every Sunday, and every Friday they have a prayer meeting. And so it's just been really neat to see how God has used a building for so many things, and the building that was dreamed of by my wife. And so we're just thankful that that God can use that. So I think that's all I have for now. Just final picture of our family. And but again, I want to say thank you to all of you for supporting us and praying for us and for all these years. And it's just been wonderful to work with you guys. So.
Well, I don't want to let you go yet, Dave, so I want to ask you some questions. You mind sitting down here in the front and just grabbing the mic so you can talk just a second? What is this you have here by chance?
These are just some artifacts from Papua. This is just a typical drum that they would use, and similar to the one you guys have there, just a little smaller. I think this is snakeskin.
Oh, really?
But,
Wow.
yeah. So it's hand carved. You can see.
They hand carved that whole thing?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow. Oh. Huh.
This is a stone axe that they would have used maybe 70 years ago. People were still living in the Stone Age there.
How many years ago?
70.
Wow.
Like in the 1950s.
Wow.
They were still finding tribes that had no access to the outside world. They didn't have steel axes or machetes or anything, and so they would make axes. They had different kinds of axes, some for chopping trees. I think this was one for sago, which is one of their foods. But they also used bows and arrows for hunting, for when they would go to war. And so this is just an example. All natural materials. This is rattan, fine, there's no nails or anything, so.
Wow.
It's amazing. All their houses were built without nails or.
Huh.
And this is a string bag that, usually the women will carry. This is a smaller one. The men would carry it like this, carry their stuff. Women will have a bigger one, and they can fill it with sweet potatoes. They can carry 50 pounds like this on their heads. They just walk, sometimes more than that. They'll have one full of sweet potatoes, and they'll have another one full of green vegetables, and then on top of that, they'll have their baby in another one. And these women are so strong, and so often they're working in the garden. They have it on still, they're digging in their garden, and so the baby can be with them.
That's the women, right? Not the men.
Right. Yeah. The women are the strong ones. Seriously. One time we went and visited some friends in the village, some missionary friends, and we had to walk about 2 hours to get to the runway, so we picked up at the end of our visit. And so we just had little backpacks, but our host said, no, they want to carry them for you. I'm like, okay. So we could just walk unimpeded. And they took all 4 of our backpacks and put them in, it was a bigger bag than this, and then gave it to a woman, and the woman carried them all for us. And she was walking faster than us, so, and we were like, well, shouldn't the men be carrying, Western society, the men is the one that's supposed to do that heavy lifting and stuff like that. No, the men aren't strong enough.
That's great.
And then here we have a Bible. This is from the Bauzi tribe, which is one of the tribes in the lowlands. I just got a copy of it. And it's the New Testament.
Is that a New Testament?
It's a New Testament. So this is one of the Bible translations that has been completed in the last, this one was done about 10 years ago.
Huh.
So,
And how many languages are there in that, just in Papua?
in Papua, there are about 250 languages.
Just in that one
Just in
island?
that one island. And that's in an area the size of Washington and Oregon.
Oh.
So like you go to Quilcene, that's a different language. Go to Bremerton, that's a different language.
Oh.
Seattle, of
Wow.
course, is a different language.
Wow.
So,
Huh.
yeah, it's-
Great. Can you hear Dave, or does he need to put the mic on? You can hear him? Okay, all right, okay.
Hello.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dave. I'm going to ask you some questions. I hope you don't mind, and put you on the spot a little bit too. So you went to the University of Washington for 4 years. You got your degree there, but then you went on to mechanic school after that, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after I graduated at University of Washington, I spent 1 year getting all my pilot ratings. I had to get a commercial license and instrument rating. So I did that for about a year while I was living in Seattle. And then I went to Everett Community College at Payne Field and did that for 2 years and got my mechanics licenses.
And then you did some more training after that, if I remember.
Right, so when I got out of mechanics school, I realized that still didn't know very much about being a mechanic. I knew the basics. You can ask my dad what's in his toolbox. He's sitting right there. His toolbox has a claw hammer, a Phillips screwdriver, a slotted screwdriver, a crescent wrench, and a pair of pliers.
What else do you need?
So I had all these tools that I had to buy for the school, and I had to learn how to use them, but I had to learn how to maintain airplanes. And so I worked for about 2 years in Seattle, and then after that, God provided the flying job for me here in Port Townsend. So
You had all that training, and you originally thought you were going to be a commercial airline pilot, which you obviously could be,
Yeah.
but you've given your life to the Lord, and you're serving Him, flying these planes in Papua New Guinea or Papua, Indonesia. So, what do you think about that?
I'm so glad that I did, that I did that instead, listened to God instead of doing what I wanted to do. I mean, it would have been fine being an airline pilot. You can be a Christian and fly for the airlines too. But I think this just has so much more significance. And even from a practical standpoint, I'm home just about every night. We fly around our area, but I usually get home in the afternoon, and so I'm home every night with my family. Airline pilots are gone 3, 4, 5 days at a time, so it's I get to be with my family more often.
So you fly in the mornings, and you have to fly different areas. You fly in pretty early in the morning, and then you have to fly a different area in the evening because of the cloud and the weather.
Right, yeah, so we take off when the sun rises, about 6 a.m., and then, because we only fly in the daylight, and so we go to the mountain runways in the morning, because after about 10 o'clock is when it gets windy up there. And I told you about landing uphill and taking off downhill. It just gets too tricky trying to land on those little runways. And so we limit ourselves to about 10 o'clock in the mountains. And then when we come back, we load up and do a second flight out to the lowlands, which is, jungle, swamp. And the lowlands are fogged in the morning usually. So we can't even go there if we wanted to in the morning. So it works out really good. We can serve both areas. Just do the mountains in the morning and the lowlands in the afternoon. So.
Some of those runways, when you land on a runway that's going uphill, normally you can, when you land on a runway and you're not going to come in just right, you circle and come around again. But you can't do that on those runways.
No, so what we do is we have what's called an airborne committal point. So like if you were landing at Jefferson County Airport here, if you could land, touch down, and a deer runs across the runway, you can take off again, and it would be no problem. But there's a mountain on the other end of the runway, and so if you try to take off, you'll crash into the mountain. And so what we do is at some point before we land, we say, I'm committed to land. And so from that point on, we will not go around. Even if the deer is on the runway or even a person or something else, we will get on the runway somehow. It might be a crash landing, but it's much safer to slide off a runway than it is to fly into a mountain. So that's kind of our philosophy of that.
That's something you do every day.
Right. Yeah, I mean, on our runway charts, it says when you're over this river, that's when you're committed to land. So when we're coming in, if everything looks good, we say, I'm committed. From that point on, you don't even think about going around. So.
So how many stories have you flown?
How many what?
How many flights have you made?
I don't know. I've flown about 4,000 or 4,500 hours, somewhere around there. But I've been there since I started flying in 2003.
So, and you're with JARS actually, and then Wycliffe Translators.
Yeah, Wycliffe. Yeah, we're with Wycliffe Bible Translators. That's kind of our parent organization, and then the technical support is provided by another related organization called JARS, and they're based in North Carolina.
What's JARS stand for?
Jungle Aviation and Radio Service. Because when it was first founded, those are the two technologies that they use: shortwave radios and then the small airplanes. So now we just call it JARS because there's so much other things that they can do.
Great. So. Well, we got just a little bit of time, and Noni, would you come up? Can I get you to do that? I'm sorry, I didn't even give you any forewarning. And I want to keep Dave here too, because he's probably going to.
You want her sitting here?
Yeah, wherever you want her, you can put her on the other side of her, or wherever you want her to put her. So, you want to? Where would you feel most comfortable, Noni? Okay. You okay there? Okay. Noni, thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for doing. I just want to get just a little bit of your testimony in, if I can. Now, you grew up a Muslim.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your family was Muslim.
They are still Muslim, yeah.
Your father was Muslim. Your mother was Muslim.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
From generation to generation, I'm the first Muslim Christian in our family. Yeah.
Well, how did you ever come out of the Muslim religion and accept Christ?
The first, I recognize I recognize I'm a sinner. As a Muslim, you have to do good works in everything. Islam did not recognize sinful nature. When I share with my moms or my family about sinful nature, what Adam and Eve did in the beginning, they said that's not be true. Because that's not my fault. They're the one disobeyed to God, not me. So, but in my journey, I recognize that through my life, I make a lot of sin, and I try to keep up with what Islam require me to be, and then I know I couldn't do it. I know it's hopeless things to do. I've been trying to follow all the things that Islam require me to be, like praying, fasting, and all those things, but I still keep sinning. I keep still doing the things that I want to do, and then I recognize that at the end of the day, I will die and I will go to hell. So I don't want to